were talking about earlier on, with its incredible body control, the whole thing just stiffens up in these modes. I mean, it's ballistically fast, it really is. Hey guys, welcome to my first drive video on this BMW X7 LCI, or facelift. This is the flagship M60i version, and it's in gorgeous Marina Bay blue and individual Cotswolds mud. Jokes aside, it's the middle of December. I've been using this car and I didn't have a chance to clean it in time for today's video, but I did get some nice overlay shots of it looking nice and clean when it was delivered. The X7 arrived in early 2019, and I remember going to the UK launch up in Scotland and being massively impressed with it as an overall package. It's a massive car, 5.2 metres long, 2 metres wide, or 2.2 if you include the wing mirrors, and 1.85 metres tall. So almost as tall as me, and you know how tall I am because I talk about it in every single video. So it's a massive object to be on the road. It also weighs 2.7 tons. But inside of this massive object, you do get 7 seats of relative luxury, and underneath the bonnet on this flagship M760i, you get the next generation M5 engine. We'll talk more about that shortly. You're looking at £109,000 base price for this particular model, but as tested, this press car is about £122,000 because it has things like the ultimate package, which is 11 grand on its own, and some fancy carbon fibre interior trim, which is about an extra £1,000. Before we go much further in the video, we kind of need to address the elephant in the room, and that is the styling of this facelifted X7. I remember when the original pre-facelift X7 came out, and I thought that that was pretty out there. The grills were massive, bigger than I'd ever seen before to that point. And I wasn't convinced, but I still thought it looked pretty good as an overall package. This new one with the split headlights, doesn't do it for me. If I'm being completely honest, I'm not the biggest fan of how this looks. Certain angles, it's not too bad. Rear 3/4, even rear end is quite nice if you exclude the horrible M60i badge, which looks like it's been taken straight off eBay. The side profile is okay, but just the front end, it just doesn't do it for me. It's just like the new 7 Series, and I really don't like it at all, and I hope that that does not become the styling language of BMWs to come. I obviously don't mind some of the big grills they produced recently, and the G80 and the G82. I own the M3, and I think it looks really good. In fact, it suits that car, but I just can't see myself ever coming around to getting excited about this design language. But that's my opinion. I'd love to know yours in the comments below. Just to give you an idea of size and proportion, apart from me standing next to the car, as I say, there's not much difference between us in height. These wheels are 22-inch. They don't even look that big on this car. They look normal, but 22-inch wheels are massive. And in fact, you can option 23-inch, but if you're from the UK, I would highly recommend against it because a bit more tyre is always going to give you better ride quality. Something else to talk about is these M-style mirror caps. Now, BMW really seem to be trickling into full M and diluting it down to their M performance cars like this one. And as you know, I'm not the biggest fan of that. I think M mirror caps should be reserved for full fat M cars, but they are popping up more and more on their, let's say, M light cars, but this is not light, but different meaning. Anyway, let's have a look under the bonnet. Before we talk about the engine, can I just point out yet another enlarged tacky M badge? It seems that BMW's marketing teams want to put as many M badges on their non-full fat M cars as possible to confuse their customers into thinking that they are in fact buying a full M car. And what makes this X7 M60i even more confusing is it now has an S designated full fat M engine under its bonnet. This is the new S68, which we're going to find in cars like the next generation M5, and we're going to find in cars like the XM. It's a 4.4 litre V8 twin turbo, so exactly the same capacity as the engine that it replaces. And it in fact produces 530 horsepower and 750 newton meters of torque. So the same figures that the outgoing X7 M50i had. Very confusing. This one has got a mild hybrid system, and that gives you about 10 horsepower and 20 newton meters of torque, and it helps you in situations like the start stop and a little bit of torque fill down low. And that's bolted on to a new and revised ZF 8-speed automatic gearbox. And of course this has BMW's X-Drive system, not a switchable one, a full permanent X-Drive system. And BMW claim that this giant 7-seater bus will do the 0 to 62 sprint in just 4.7 seconds. And we will test that out very shortly. When BMW launched the pre-facelift X7 back in 2019, they were very quick to point out and make sure that we knew it wasn't an extended version of their X5. It was in fact a 7 Series that had been turned into an SUV. I never really agreed with that for two reasons. Firstly, I think the current X5 is a brilliant car and a brilliant package, so there's no shame in just saying that it is an extended version, slightly more luxurious version of that car. But calling the X7 a 7 Series or 7 Series SUV is completely wrong as far as I'm concerned, and we'll get onto why that is when we jump back there shortly. In terms of the front of the cabin, well, it's very nice up here, and it was in the pre-facelift car. It's no surprise that the updates in here consist mostly of BMW's new curved display, which we find in many of their recent models, and iDrive 8. We also have some ambient lighting built into the trim on the dashboard here that changes colour depending on which colour the rest of the ambient lighting is in the car, which is quite cool. But there is yet another M badge down there which also illuminates, just in case you happen to miss all of the ones on the outside when you approach this car. And that ambient lighting extends to this brilliant Sky Lounge panoramic sunroof, which is part of that ultimate package we talked about on the outside. Other things included in that are the Bowers & Wilkins sound system, which is mind-blowing. Things like ventilated front seats that also have a massage function. We have 5-zone climate control in here for those passengers right at the back, electric rear blinds, etc. You name it, and this car has almost definitely got it. Something else that I forgot to talk about are these ventilation controls. Now, I don't really like the way they look, and I definitely don't like the way they feel. I wouldn't say they feel cheap or tacky, but they just don't feel very, let's say, BMW to me. And I also don't like these little plastic surrounds above the main vents. They don't look particularly nice. The plastic on them is a different shade to every other bit of plastic in here, and it's almost like they're a bit of an afterthought. So not the biggest fan of those. As I say, everything else in here is very high quality. There's leather everywhere, there's Alcantara everywhere, and you definitely don't feel shortchanged sitting up the front. Jumping back here to the second row of seats, well, it's a very nice place to sit. These seats are electrically adjustable with the backrests and the base moving forwards and backwards, obviously depending on who's sitting in the front and who's sitting in the back. That front driver's seat is set to my position, so you can easily get 2 very lanky adults in here. In fact, you could get 4 of us without any issues whatsoever. Each window passenger back here gets electrical blinds, and the use of the rear sunroof blind, I can open and close that, and the main panoramic sunroof blind as well. There's also sockets in the back of both of the front seats where you can put an adapter that will then hold your phone or your iPad or whatever. There's a USB socket there. We then have 2-zone climate control back here for each outside passenger, with heated seats on both sides, and 2 more USB sockets down there and a 12-volt socket. So you've got so much power back here, which is what you need if you're going to use this as a big family bus. We have some cup holders in here and a small little storage container in there. Not sure what you could actually get in there. It's close to useless, but let's see what the center seat is like, because the transmission tunnel is basically non-existent down there because it sits up so high, and obviously they can run that below the car as opposed to through the middle of it essentially. So sitting in the middle, well, I can still fit in here. I'm not sure if I'm on any camera shot right this second, but it's the short straw like it is in many cars. It's very firm, and if there was 3 adults across here, even though this car is 2+ meters wide, you're going to struggle with 3 big adults in terms of shoulder space, etc. Let's just get back to the more comfortable seat. These are very comfortable, but it is not 7 Series level of luxury back here as far as I'm concerned, and I've spent a lot of time with the 7 Series. You now find me in the 3rd row of seats, so right at the back of the car, and I have to say that this is definitely the best 3rd row of seats in any 7-seater car that I've seen anyway. And although you'd definitely choose the 2nd row or one of the front seats over these, you definitely don't feel too short-changed back here. I'm 6'4", maybe a little bit tall, but I could fit in here for shorter journeys. But anyone sort of under 6 foot, I reckon, wouldn't have any issues in terms of headroom. We've got that 5-zone climate up here, and in fact, both of these seats are heated as well, which is just crazy. I mean, most cars don't have heated seats on the 2nd row. This has it on the 3rd row as well. We have cup holders down here. We have our own vents here to go with that 5-zone climate. We've got speakers all around us. We've got this light panel. I want to call it a sunroof, but it doesn't open, but with its own individual blind, which is really nice and brings some light back here, which in turn feels like it's more spacious than perhaps it is. We have individual reading lights as well. The main negatives about this 3rd row of seats, as it is with all 7-seater SUVs, is the faff of getting in and out. But once you're in here, well, it's certainly the nicest 3rd row of seats that I've ever sat in. First things first, let's test out this car's claimed acceleration figures. BMW say it will do the 0 to 62 sprint in just 4.7 seconds. I'm in Sport Plus. I've engaged Sports Automatic. I've turned all the traction control systems off because we shouldn't be needing them today. It's nice and dry out there, although it is 4 degrees. My Racebox Mini is ready to go. Left foot is hard down on the brake, right foot on the accelerator, and here we go. Crazy. 3.97 seconds to 60 miles an hour, because that's how I time all my cars, because I'm from the UK. That's still crazy. Even if you add 1/10 and a half to that, that's 4.1 seconds, which is 0.6 of a second quicker than BMW claim, which is no surprise because all of their acceleration figures are very conservative, but that's mighty impressive when you consider we're in a 7-seat luxury bus. We'll start by talking about its brilliant and commanding driving position. Just like that X5M competition I had on the channel recently, you really do have advantages of sitting so high. Firstly, you see different views of your surrounding areas. So when you're driving along here, I can just about see over that hedgerow, whereas in most cars, you you just don't have that vision. So it's great for passengers that want to go for a little sightseeing drive, but more importantly, as a driver, you can usually see a lot further down the road, whether it's a A or B road, or even when you're on the motorway, especially if cars are braking, you can see further down the road. So in a way, it makes you feel a bit safer because you can react to things that are further away. And once you've had that in your life for a week, you kind of get used to it. When you jump back into, let's say, a normal car like my M3, when I say normal, I mean normal seating position right down there, you do miss this vision, and it's great vision all around. Massive door mirrors give you loads of side vision. I can see through the back window nice and clearly, but when there's passengers that are sitting right at the back on that third row where I've just squeezed into, that vision is restricted. But on the whole, it's a really easy and great car to drive on the open road. That's not the case though when you take it into a city like London, because as we talked about already, it is massive, and it's even big by today's standards of larger cars, and trying to park something like this or navigate it through a narrow road is really difficult, and something that I would not want to live with if I lived in a city. Most of you probably know that I'm not the biggest fan of this new iDrive 8 and the curved display, mostly because it's all touchscreen or voice control. But to be fair, most of the systems that I've tried so far, so the ones in the i4 and the iX, have worked reasonably well. This particular one, I don't know if it's a software glitch, but it's been really tricky. It's been very glitchy. It doesn't understand anything I say. So if I use a voice control and I ask it to navigate me to somewhere, it's been completely useless in that aspect, and therefore it has frustrated me. And because this car is packed full of driver aids and pedestrian aids and lane assist aids, which definitely don't assist you, they're just dangerous, trying to figure out how to turn those off in the short time that I've had this car has just been a bit of a headache. And that's what I mean. If I own this car, if I had it for longer, then I'm sure it becomes second nature. But in this condensed amount of time, all of this tech has been a bit of an overload for me, and I still prefer the iDrive 6 and iDrive 7 that preceded it. I just think this is just too complex. There's too much going on, and I don't think we really need it in our lives. But there are advantages of it. It's very, very clear, even with all this sort of direct sunlight, and there's no reflections going on, and the graphics in the actual dashboard binnacle itself are better than the pre-facelift in my opinion. But yeah, I really sit on the fence as to whether this is a way forward, or if this is a progression compared to the old system, or if in fact we're going to get rid of all of this curved display at the next generation, because it just drives people a little bit wild. About 6 months ago, I got behind the wheel of a pre-production XM, and I remember when I drove that car, I talked about how well it controlled its chassis for such a big and heavy lump. Now, the footprint of the XM and this X7 must be pretty similar, as with their weight, and I wouldn't be surprised if they share a lot of underpinnings with each other, because in the time that I've had this car, I've also felt very similar things going on underneath the skin. This has got active anti-roll bars, which in turn with the 48 volt mild hybrid system, I believe, it does a very good job of keeping this car flat and stable, and the more you push it, the more it feels supported, and it does work miracles in terms of controlling this amount of mass. Even when you've got 4 or 5 adults in here and the boot is full of luggage, it still controls its mass extremely well. But you are aware of things going on underneath, so it does feel slightly artificial, especially when you're in comfort. The ride quality itself in comfort is really, really good. when you consider that we're on 22-inch wheels, as we talked about a couple of times already, it flows along some of the worst roads around where I live without any issues. And because those wheels are so big, they don't fall down potholes as easier as, say, smaller 18-19-inch wheels. So they're actually really good for uneven or poor surface roads. And I have to say, I've become very used to this lovely sort of flowing ride quality, but the second you tip it into a corner or put it onto one of your favorite roads, you can feel it all firming up very quickly. But I think when you're in comfort, it does get a little bit confused as to what you want from the car. But when you put it into Sport or Sport Plus or Sport Individual, that's when this car seems to work at its best. We've already talked about that mighty full M-spec S68 4.4 litre V8 under the bonnet. Unfortunately, the calibration when you're in comfort is a bit strange. So when you're coming out of a junction like this, that's quite a dangerous junction, you look both ways, thankfully it's clear. If you add a bit of throttle, nothing seems to happen. A bit more throttle, and then it takes off, and it's really hard to modulate that. So it seems like it's all or nothing. And once again, in the 5 or 6 days I've been driving this, I just haven't been able to get it right. And I had my parents and my other half in the car the other day, and every time we took off from a set of traffic lights or pulled out of a junction, it was a really jerky maneuver, and that was in comfort. And that problem or calibration only seems to get worse when you put it into Sport or Sport Plus, as you would expect, because the throttle response sharpens up. And I'm wondering if that's something to do with the fact that this engine was really made to work alongside a full hybrid system like in the XM, and like what I assume we're going to get in the next generation M5, where you're going to get 650 or 750 horsepower even from this engine, but it's going to be paired alongside a hybrid unit. And I think and assume, again judging off that XM drive, that the hybrid unit is going to torque fill down low, so it's going to give you a nice smooth pull away and delivery, and then obviously the V8 will help with the rest of the rev range and the rest of that sort of acceleration stage. So it's going to be interesting to see, and I'd be interested to hear if anyone else has got one of these, if they also experienced that and have maybe got used to it and managed to drive around it now, or if it is something that still does plague this particular model. Let's end this first drive in this car's happiest mode, which is Sport Plus. So let's just cycle through, there we go, and then pull this tiny little gear lever, which is also new. I forgot to talk about that earlier on, which doesn't offend me too much in this car, because you're very unlikely to be using the gear selector as a manual changer in an X7. You've got the paddles up here, so let's pull them now and push on a little bit, because as we already know, it's a very quick car in a straight line, and it does miracles in the bends as well. Going back to what we were talking about earlier on, with its incredible body control, the whole thing just stiffens up in these modes. I mean, it's ballistically fast, it really is. You wouldn't think it looking on the outside just how big it is, but any gear and although we're missing that low down torque and initial pickup coming out of junctions, when you're on the move, I think its maximum torque figure of 750 newton meters is available from about 1800 RPM. So going along here in fifth gear at 40 miles an hour, I'll wait to see if that truck's going to put in front of us. It's not. 40 miles an hour and foot on the floor, and there's 50, and there's 60, and now it's starting to really get into its stride. It really likes to rev out this engine, which is good, which is what you want in your M engine. But yeah, the way it handles, the way it goes, the way it stops, its control. It's crazy that I'm saying this car's biggest plus points are the way it drives when you push it hard, because that shouldn't be the case. Although it has a good ride quality in comfort and it's extremely practical, as we talked about, it seems to be at its happiest when you're in Sport Plus and when you're pushing it along. Last thing to talk about is this car's revised and updated ZF 8-speed automatic gearbox. To me, it doesn't feel as good as the previous version, but I think that's because this one has been overcomplicated with the mild hybrid system, etc. It probably has a lot more to do, but it just doesn't seem to respond as well. The downshifts aren't as satisfying, but coming out of here, it feels more like a spaceship than a regular car. It really does. I mean, that torque and the way it just propels itself out of anywhere in any corner, it's just crazy. To think this is a 7-seat family car. Really, really insane, but fun at the same time somehow. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this video up because it is very quickly getting dark on this winter's day. And my conclusion about this car, well, it's a difficult one. It's kind of a love-hate relationship, and as we talked about earlier on, I think if I had this car for a longer period of time, I would love it more. I wouldn't love its looks more, because I'm really not a fan of those, especially around the front end. I don't think they're ever going to grow on me, a bit like the new 7 Series. But once you're inside, everything starts to make a lot more sense. And although I'm not the biggest fan of this curved display in the iDrive 8, I'm sure I'm going to understand it more when my Touring arrives in a few months' time, because that car's also going to have this setup. But in terms of what this car does, gives you amazing ride quality 1 minute, and it feels like a rather large, overpowered hot hatch the next minute, which is just insane. I think, yeah, BMW have done an incredible job with this. And although that S68 isn't calibrated to perfection or to normal BMW standards, in my opinion, and this revised ZF 8-speed gearbox isn't spot on, it does give me hope and get me excited about the incoming M5 that is going to be paired up to something like a mild hybrid system that's going to give that engine exactly what it needs to work perfectly. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this X7 M60i first drive video. If you did, please give us a thumbs up, leave any comments below, and I'll see you at another video very, very soon. Cheers.